The moment Zelda Owens stepped off the stagecoach in Fort Garland, Colorado, in the scorching summer of 1878, she knew she had made a terrible mistake leaving Boston. The heat struck her like a physical blow, nothing like the humid summers back east. This was different, a dry, merciless heat that seemed to suck the moisture from her skin within seconds. The sun hung overhead like a vengeful eye, and Zelda immediately felt sweat begin to bead on her forehead beneath her proper traveling bonnet. She had worn her finest dress for the journey, a deep blue cotton with long sleeves and a high collar, appropriate for a young woman of 22 traveling alone. Now she realized how foolish that choice had been. "Miss Owens." A voice called from somewhere nearby, but Zelda could barely see through the bright glare. She raised a gloved hand to shield her eyes, squinting across the dusty street of Fort Garland. The town was smaller than she had imagined, just a collection of wooden buildings scattered along a single main road, with the massive peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rising in the distance. "Yes, I am Zelda Owens," she called back, her voice already feeling dry and cracked. An older woman in a faded calico dress approached, her weathered face creased with concern. "I am Mrs. Patterson, wife of the general store owner. Your Aunt Martha sent word you would be arriving today. Come, dear, you look about ready to faint. Let us get you out of this sun." Zelda gratefully followed Mrs. Patterson toward a building with a painted sign reading Patterson's General Store. But before they reached the shade of the covered walkway, Zelda felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. The world seemed to tilt, and she stumbled, her vision going spotty. "Miss Owens." Mrs. Patterson cried out, but her voice sounded distant, echoing. Zelda felt herself falling, the hard-packed dirt of the street rushing up to meet her. But instead of hitting the ground, strong arms caught her, holding her steady. Through her blurred vision, she saw a man's face, tanned and concerned, with striking green eyes that seemed to cut through the haze. "Madam, you are burning up," a deep voice said, close to her ear. "Mrs. Patterson, we need to get her inside now." Yes, bring her in, Wyatt, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice tight with worry. The man named Wyatt lifted Zelda as though she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest as he carried her into the blessed dimness of the general store. He set her down carefully on a wooden bench, and Zelda became dimly aware of people moving around her, voices speaking in urgent tones. "She is already sunburned something fierce," Wyatt said. "Look at her face and neck." Mrs. Patterson made a clucking sound with her tongue. "That proper Boston skin is not made for Colorado sun, I fear. Wyatt, fetch some water from the barrel, cold as you can find." Zelda forced her eyes open, fighting against the dizziness. The man called Wyatt was moving away toward the back of the store, and she got her first real look at him. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who spent his days working hard. He wore dusty brown pants, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, and a red bandana around his neck. His hat, a well-worn cowboy hat with a wide brim, hung on his back by its string. He returned quickly with a dipper of water, kneeling before Zelda. "Drink slowly," he instructed, bringing the dipper to her lips. The water was cool and sweet, and Zelda drank gratefully, feeling some strength return to her limbs. When she had finished, Wyatt took the dipper away and studied her face with those remarkable green eyes. "Thank you," Zelda managed to whisper. "I do not know what happened, I just became so dizzy." "You got too much sun too fast," Wyatt said simply. "Your skin is already red as a tomato, and that dress is far too heavy for Colorado in July. No offense intended, madam." "None taken," Zelda said, feeling embarrassed. She knew she must look ridiculous, fainting like some delicate flower. Back in Boston, She had prided herself on her practicality and independence, had insisted she could make this journey west alone despite her mother's protests. Now, not even an hour in Colorado, she had proven herself completely unprepared. Mrs. Patterson bustled over with a damp cloth. "Here, dear, let us cool down that poor skin of yours. Wyatt, you best fetch Martha and let her know her niece has arrived and needs tending." Wyatt stood, his movements fluid and economical. "Yes, madam, I will ride out to the Owens place right now." He looked down at Zelda and something in his expression softened. "You will be fine, Miss Owens. Colorado takes some getting used to, but you will adjust. Welcome to Fort Garland." Then he was gone, his boots thudding softly on the wooden floor, and Zelda heard the jingle of spurs as he left the store. She leaned back against the wall, letting Mrs. Patterson press the cool cloth to her burning face and neck, and wondered what kind of place she had come to. Fort Garland had been established as a military fort back in 1858. Mrs. Patterson explained as she tended to Zelda, though the Army had abandoned it just a few years ago in 1876. Now it was a civilian settlement, home to ranchers, farmers, and those trying to make a life in the harsh but beautiful San Luis Valley. The town served the surrounding homesteads and ranches, providing supplies and serving as a gathering place for the scattered community. Zelda's Aunt Martha had moved here 5 years ago with her late husband, claiming a homestead and building it into a modest but successful ranch. Uncle Thomas had died 2 years past, thrown from a horse, and Aunt Martha had been running the ranch alone ever since. When Zelda had written asking if she might come west for a visit, to escape the stifling expectations of Boston society, Aunt Martha had written back immediately with an enthusiastic invitation. Now, sitting in the dim coolness of Patterson's general store, Zelda wondered if she had the strength to survive even a few months in this unforgiving land. An hour later, the sound of horse hooves and wagon wheels announced the arrival of Aunt Martha. The woman who swept into the store was not the prim, proper Lady Zelda remembered from childhood visits back east. This Martha wore men's trousers, a practical cotton shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat similar to the one Wyatt had worn. Her face was tanned and lined from years in the sun, but her eyes were bright with intelligence and warmth. "Zelda," Martha exclaimed, rushing over to embrace her niece. "Oh, my dear girl, look at you. We need to get you out of those ridiculous clothes and into something sensible." Despite her embarrassment, Zelda found herself smiling. "Hello, Aunt Martha. I fear I have made quite a spectacle of myself on my very first day." "Nonsense," Martha said firmly. "Everyone struggles with the altitude and sun when they first arrive. You are at 8,000 feet elevation here, girl. The air is thinner, and the sun is twice as strong as anything you experienced in Boston. Come, let us get you home and properly outfitted for Colorado living." Zelda stood carefully, relieved to find her legs steady beneath her. Mrs. Patterson had packed her trunk onto Aunt Martha's wagon, and with many thanks and promises to visit again soon, Zelda let her aunt help her outside. The sun was just beginning its descent toward the western mountains, but the heat still pressed down like a physical weight. Zelda climbed onto the wagon seat beside her aunt, grateful for the slight breeze that stirred as Martha urged the horses into motion. As they rolled out of town, Zelda noticed a figure on horseback riding parallel to them, about 50 yards off to the side. It was Wyatt, sitting easy in his saddle, his hat back on his head now, shading his face. "Wyatt Weston insisted on escorting us home," Martha explained, noticing Zelda's gaze. "He is a good man, owns the ranch adjacent to mine. Been a great help to me since Thomas passed." "That was kind of him," Zelda said, watching the cowboy ride. There was something graceful about the way he moved with his horse, as if they were one creature. Wyatt is one of the finest men I have known, Martha continued. Came to Colorado about 7 years ago from Texas, bought his land fair and square and built his ranch up from nothing. He runs cattle and horses, has a real gift with the animals, and he has been a true friend to me, helping with repairs and heavy work, never asking anything in return. Zelda heard the fondness in her aunt's voice and smiled. He seems very capable. That he is, Martha agreed. And single, I might add, though half the unmarried women in the territory have set their caps for him. He is friendly enough, but I have never seen him court anyone seriously. He is married to his ranch, I think. They rode in companionable silence for a while, following a dirt track that wound through the valley. The landscape was unlike anything Zelda had ever seen. To the east, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose in dramatic peaks, their tops still touched with snow even in July. To the west, the San Juan Mountains created another wall of rocky grandeur. Between these ranges, the valley spread wide and relatively flat, covered in sagebrush and scattered grasses that had turned golden in the summer heat. The ranch house, when they reached it, was a sturdy adobe structure with a wooden roof and a wide porch facing the mountains. Behind it stood a barn, several corrals, and various outbuildings. The whole property had a well-maintained, practical look to it. Wyatt rode up to the house as Martha pulled the wagon to a stop. He dismounted smoothly and moved to help Zelda down from the wagon seat. His hands were strong and calloused as they closed around her waist, lifting her easily to the ground. "How are you feeling, Miss Owens?" he asked, genuine concern in his green eyes. "Much better, thank you, Mr. Weston," Zelda replied. "And thank you for your help earlier. I am grateful." "No thanks needed," Wyatt said. He released her waist but kept one hand lightly on her elbow, as if afraid she might still collapse. "You just need time to adjust. Make sure you wear a hat anytime you go outside and keep covered up as much as you can stand the heat." "I will," Zelda promised. Wyatt looked at Martha. "I will unload the trunk and bring it inside, then be on my way. I am sure you ladies have much to catch up on." "Stay for supper, Wyatt," Martha said. "I insist. You rode all the way out to fetch me and escorted us home. The least I can do is feed you." Wyatt hesitated, his eyes flicking to Zelda briefly before he nodded. "That would be much appreciated, Martha. Thank you." While Wyatt carried Zelda's heavy trunk inside as though it weighed nothing, Martha showed her niece to a small but comfortable bedroom. The walls were the same thick adobe as the rest of the house, and a single window looked out toward the eastern mountains. The furnishings were simple but well made: a bed with a colorful quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, a wardrobe, and a small writing desk. "It is not fancy, but it is comfortable," Martha said. "Now, let us see about getting you into some proper ranch clothes." From her own wardrobe, Martha pulled out several items and brought them to Zelda's room. There were cotton shirts, canvas trousers, and a split riding skirt. "I had these made when I first arrived," Martha explained. "They will be a bit large on you, but we can alter them. In the meantime, at least you will not roast in those layers you brought from Boston." Zelda changed gratefully, stripping off the heavy dress and the layers of petticoats and undergarments deemed necessary for a proper Boston lady. The canvas trousers felt strange at first and slightly scandalous, but the freedom of movement they allowed was intoxicating. The cotton shirt was loose and comfortable, and when Martha handed her a leather vest to wear over it, Zelda felt almost like a different person. "Much better," Martha said approvingly. "You look like you might actually survive out here now. Come, let us wash that poor face of yours with some cool water, and I will give you some salve for the sunburn." The salve smelled strongly of herbs but felt soothing on Zelda's burning skin. As Martha gently applied it to her face and neck, Zelda found herself relaxing for the first time since leaving Boston. "Tell me truly, Aunt Martha," she said. "Why did you invite me here? Mother said you have been after her for years to let me visit, but you never said why." Martha was quiet for a moment, her weathered hands gentle on Zelda's face. "Because I see in you what I saw in myself at your age," she finally said. That restless feeling, that sense that there must be more to life than tea parties and social calls and waiting for some acceptable man to choose you. "I came west because I wanted to truly live, Zelda. I wanted to work with my own hands and build something real. I thought perhaps you might want the same." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, that is exactly how I feel." "Then you are in the right place," Martha said firmly. "This life is not easy. It is hard work from dawn to dusk, and the land can be harsh. But it is honest work, and you will go to bed each night bone-tired but satisfied in a way you never felt in Boston. I can promise you that." Supper that evening was a simple but hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and strong coffee. Wyatt had washed up at the pump outside and sat at Martha's kitchen table with his hat hung on a peg by the door. His hair was dark brown with hints of auburn, Zelda noticed, and he kept it trimmed short in a practical style. "How are you finding Colorado so far, Miss Owens?" Wyatt asked as they ate. There was a hint of amusement in his voice, but his eyes were kind. "It is not quite what I expected," Zelda admitted. "More beautiful and more brutal all at once." "That is a good description," Wyatt said. "Colorado will test you, but if you can meet those tests, she will reward you. The key is to respect the land and not try to fight it." "Wyatt has a poet's soul under that cowboy exterior," Martha teased. Wyatt shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Just saying what I have learned in my time here." "How long have you been in Colorado?" Zelda asked, curious about this man who seemed so completely at home in this harsh landscape. 7 years come August," Wyatt replied. "Left Texas after my father died and my brother inherited the family ranch. Did not see much point in staying where I was not needed, so I headed north looking for a fresh start. Found this valley and knew it was where I wanted to be." "Do you miss Texas?" Zelda asked. Wyatt considered the question. "Sometimes I miss the live oaks and the rolling hills, but Colorado suits me better, I think. The mountains make me feel less alone somehow, like they are watching over the valley." After supper, Wyatt thanked Martha for the meal and prepared to ride back to his own ranch. At the door, he turned to Zelda. "I hope you will give Colorado a fair chance, Miss Owens. It grows on you, this place." "I intend to," Zelda said, "and please call me Zelda. I have a feeling we will be seeing each other often if our ranches are neighbors." Something flickered in Wyatt's green eyes. "Only if you call me Wyatt. We do not stand much on formality out here." "Wyatt it is, then," Zelda said, and was rewarded with a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. After he had gone, Martha turned to Zelda with a knowing look. "He is a good man," she said again. "You mentioned that," Zelda replied, feeling her sunburned cheeks grow even warmer. "Just making sure you heard me," Martha said with a laugh. "Now, off to bed with you. Tomorrow I start teaching you how to run a ranch, and we begin early here." Zelda fell asleep almost as soon as her head hit the pillow, exhausted from the long journey and the day's events. But her dreams were filled with green eyes and strong hands and the vast, beautiful, dangerous landscape of Colorado. The next morning began before dawn. Martha shook Zelda awake while stars still glittered in the dark sky outside her window. "Come on, girl. The animals do not care that you are tired." Groaning, Zelda forced herself out of bed and dressed quickly in the borrowed ranch clothes. Martha had left a wide-brimmed hat on the chair by the door, and Zelda placed it on her head, tucking her long brown hair up under it as best she could. In the kitchen, Martha handed her a cup of strong coffee and a thick slice of bread with butter. "Eat quickly. We need to feed the chickens, collect eggs, milk the cow, and check the horses before breakfast." The work was harder than Zelda had imagined. The chickens scattered and squawked when she tried to collect their eggs, pecking at her hands indignantly. The cow, a placid creature named Bessie, seemed to sense Zelda's inexperience and kept shifting just as she was getting the hang of the milking. And when they went to check the horses in the corral, Zelda found herself both awed and slightly frightened by the powerful animals. "That bay mare there is my riding horse, Juniper," Martha said, pointing to a pretty reddish-brown horse with a black mane and tail. "She is sweet-tempered and reliable. The others are working horses, for pulling the wagon and plowing. Eventually, we will need to find you your own riding horse. You cannot get far in this country without learning to ride." By the time they finished the morning chores and sat down to a proper breakfast of eggs, bacon, and more coffee, Zelda was already tired. But there was a satisfaction in the fatigue that she had never felt after a day of social calls and embroidery in Boston. "You did well for your first morning," Martha said approvingly. "Your hands will toughen up soon enough." Zelda looked down at her palms, already sporting a few small blisters. "I hope so." The sound of horse hooves outside brought both women's heads up. Martha went to the window and smiled. "It is Wyatt. He said he would bring over a few extra hats for you. The one you are wearing is too big, I can see." Indeed, the hat Martha had loaned Zelda kept slipping down over her eyes. When Martha opened the door, Wyatt stood on the porch with 3 hats in his hands. "Morning, Martha, Zelda," he said, his eyes going to Zelda and lingering there for a moment. "Thought you might need these. They belonged to my sister when she visited a few years back, but she left them behind when she went back to Texas. They should fit you better than Martha's old one." "That is very thoughtful," Zelda said, coming to the door. Wyatt handed her the hats one by one and she tried each on. The third one, a tan felt hat with a decorative braided leather band, fit perfectly. "That one looks good," Wyatt said, and there was something in his tone that made Zelda's heart skip slightly. "Thank you, Wyatt. This is very kind." "Just being neighborly," he said. Then, turning to Martha, "I am riding out to check my herd today, but I will be back tomorrow to help you with that fence repair we talked about." "I appreciate that," Martha said, "though I am starting to think I should be paying you for all the work you do around here." "Your friendship is payment enough," Wyatt said simply. He touched his hat in farewell. "Ladies." His eyes met Zelda's again briefly, and then he was mounting his horse and riding away. Over the next 2 weeks, Zelda began to find her rhythm in this new life. Her skin tanned despite the hats and her attempts to stay covered. The blisters on her hands hardened into calluses. She learned to gather eggs without getting pecked, to milk Bessie efficiently, and to move around the horses without spooking them. She also saw Wyatt nearly every day. He came by to help with various tasks around the ranch, always finding some excuse to check on Martha. But Zelda noticed the way his eyes sought her out, the way he seemed to time his visits for when the morning chores were done and Zelda might be free to talk for a few minutes. They began to develop an easy friendship. Wyatt would tell her about his ranch, about the cattle and horses he raised, about the challenges of making a living in this harsh but beautiful land. Zelda told him about Boston, about the life she had left behind, though she found those memories growing hazier each day, as if that life had belonged to someone else entirely. One morning, about 3 weeks after Zelda's arrival, she woke to find the house quiet. On the kitchen table was a note from Martha saying she had ridden into Fort Garland for supplies and would be back by early afternoon. Zelda was to continue with the morning chores and stay close to the house. Zelda ate a quick breakfast and headed out to feed the chickens. The morning was already growing warm, promising to be another scorching July day. She had just finished collecting the eggs and was heading to milk Bessie when she heard a commotion from the horse corral. Curious, she set down the egg basket and walked over to investigate. The horses were normally calm in the morning, but today they were running along the fence line, tossing their heads and whinnying nervously. Zelda climbed up on the lower fence rail to get a better look and immediately saw the problem. A rattlesnake, thick-bodied and easily 4 feet long, was coiled in the corner of the corral. Its tail vibrated, creating that distinctive warning sound that made every creature with sense give it a wide berth. The horses were clearly terrified but trapped in the corral with the snake. Zelda's heart pounded. She knew rattlesnakes were dangerous, deadly even, but she could not just leave it there with Martha's horses. Moving slowly, she climbed down from the fence and looked around for something she could use as a weapon. There was a hoe leaning against the barn wall and she grabbed it, her hands shaking slightly. She had just reached the corral gate when a voice called out sharply, "Zelda, stop right there." She turned to see Wyatt riding hard toward the house, his horse's hooves throwing up dust. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped and strode toward her, his face tight with concern. "There is a rattlesnake in the corral with the horses," Zelda said, pointing. "I know, I can hear it," Wyatt said, "but you are not going in there with just a hoe. Those things are fast and mean." "Let me handle it." He took the hoe from her hands and opened the corral gate carefully. The horses immediately bolted through the opening, escaping to the larger paddock beyond. Wyatt moved into the corral with careful, deliberate steps, approaching the snake from an angle. The rattler struck at him, lightning quick, but Wyatt was ready. He brought the hoe down hard, severing the snake's head from its body with one clean blow. Even beheaded, the body writhed and coiled, and the tail continued to rattle for several long seconds. Wyatt used the hoe to scoop up both pieces of the snake and carried them well away from the ranch buildings, tossing them into the sagebrush where scavengers would make short work of the remains. When he returned, Zelda was still standing by the corral, her heart racing from the near danger. "That was incredibly foolish," Wyatt said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "You could have been bitten. One bite from a snake that size could kill you." "I did not know what else to do," Zelda said, feeling defensive. "I could not just leave it there with the horses." "You should have waited for help," Wyatt said. He was standing very close to her now, and Zelda could see genuine fear lingering in his green eyes. "Where is Martha?" "She rode to town for supplies. She will be back this afternoon." Wyatt ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "You should not be out here alone. There are too many dangers for someone who is still learning the land." "I can handle myself," Zelda said, bristling at the implication that she was helpless. "I am not saying you cannot," Wyatt said, his voice softening. "But knowing how to handle yourself comes from experience, and you do not have that yet. There is no shame in needing help, Zelda." Something in the way he said her name with such tenderness and concern made Zelda's anger evaporate. "You are right," she admitted. "I should have been more careful." "Thank you for coming when you did." "I was riding over to check on you and Martha," Wyatt said. "Saw the horses acting strange and figured something was wrong." He paused, then added quietly, "I worry about you." "You do?" Zelda asked, her heart suddenly beating faster for a different reason. Wyatt looked at her, really looked at her, and Zelda felt the air between them change, becoming charged with something unspoken. "Yes," he said simply. "I do." They stood there for a long moment, the morning sun beating down, the mountains watching over them, and Zelda felt something shift inside her chest. This man, this strong, capable, kind man, worried about her, cared about her safety. and she realized with startling clarity that she cared about him too, far more than she had admitted to herself. "I should finish the morning chores," she finally said, though she made no move to step away. "Let me help you," Wyatt offered, "at least until Martha gets back." Together they milked Bessie and checked on the rest of the animals. Wyatt worked with easy competence, and Zelda found herself watching him more than she probably should. She noticed the way his hands moved, sure and gentle with the animals. The way the morning sun brought out reddish highlights in his dark hair. The way he would look at her and smile, transforming his serious face. When the chores were done, Wyatt showed no signs of leaving. "Let me teach you something useful," he said. "How to properly check for snakes before you go walking around. This time of year, they come out in the mornings and evenings when it is cooler. You need to be watchful." He spent the next hour teaching her what to look for, how to move carefully in areas where snakes might hide, and what to do if she encountered one. It was practical knowledge that Zelda knew could save her life, and she paid close attention. "You are a good student," Wyatt said when they finally sat down on the porch steps to rest. "Quick to learn and not afraid to ask questions." "I have a good teacher," Zelda replied. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the heat shimmer over the valley. Then Wyatt said quietly, "I should tell you something." "What is it?" Zelda asked, turning to look at him. "I have been finding reasons to come over here every day," he admitted. "More reasons than are strictly necessary, and it is not because Martha needs the help. She is one of the most capable women I know." "Then why?" Zelda asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Wyatt turned to face her fully, his green eyes serious. "Because I want to see you. I look forward to it all day, whatever excuse I can come up with to ride over here. And I know it has only been a few weeks, and I know you are from a completely different world, but I cannot seem to help myself." Zelda's breath caught in her throat. "I look forward to seeing you too," she confessed. "Every morning I hope you will come by. And when you do not, the day feels less bright somehow." A slow smile spread across Wyatt's face. "Really, really," Zelda confirmed. Wyatt reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. The touch sent warmth flooding through Zelda's entire body. "I do not know where this might lead," he said, "but I would like to find out, if you are willing." "I am willing," Zelda said softly. They sat there on the porch steps, holding hands and watching the valley until the sound of Martha's wagon announced her return. They moved apart, but not before Martha caught a glimpse of them and smiled knowingly to herself. That evening, after Wyatt had helped unload Martha's supplies and headed back to his own ranch, Martha sat Zelda down at the kitchen table. "I saw you two on the porch," she said without preamble. "Aunt Martha," Zelda began, but Martha held up a hand. "I am not scolding you, girl. I am pleased. Wyatt is a fine man, and I have seen the way he looks at you. More importantly, I have seen the way you look at him." "It is too soon, is it not?" Zelda asked. "I have only been here 3 weeks." "Sometimes you know," Martha said simply. "When Thomas courted me, I knew within a week that I wanted to marry him. The heart does not always follow society's timeline. But I came here to learn independence," Zelda said, "to find myself and become my own person. Not to immediately fall for the first cowboy I meet." Martha laughed. "Those things are not mutually exclusive, Zelda. You can be independent and still love someone. In fact, I think the best relationships are between two independent people who choose to face life together. And if I am not mistaken, Wyatt would never ask you to be anything other than exactly who you are." Zelda thought about that as she lay in bed that night. She had come west seeking freedom from the restrictive expectations of Boston society, from the pressure to marry well and become a proper society wife. She had wanted to discover who she really was when stripped of all those expectations. And she was doing that. Every day she grew stronger, more capable, more confident in herself. But she was also falling in love. And maybe, as Aunt Martha said, those two things did not have to be in conflict. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt both exciting and comfortable. Zelda continued learning how to run the ranch, growing more skilled and confident each day. She learned to ride Juniper, Martha's gentle mare, first just around the property and then on longer rides through the valley. She learned to help with basic repairs around the ranch, to fix fence posts and mend tack. Her hands grew rough with work, her face tanned despite her best efforts with the hats, and her body grew lean and strong from the constant physical labor. And through it all, Wyatt was there. Sometimes, he helped with heavy tasks that were too much for Martha and Zelda alone. Other times he just stopped by to visit, to talk and laugh and share a cup of coffee on the porch. He took Zelda riding, showing her the most beautiful spots in the valley, teaching her to read the land and the weather. They talked about everything and nothing, and Zelda found herself falling deeper in love with this quiet, thoughtful cowboy who treated her like she was precious, but never fragile. One evening in late August, Wyatt asked if he could take Zelda on a proper ride, just the two of them, up into the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Martha agreed immediately, though she fixed Wyatt with a stern look that made him promise to have Zelda back before dark. "I will protect her with my life," Wyatt said seriously, and Martha nodded, satisfied. They set out in the early afternoon when the worst heat of the day had passed, but there was still plenty of light left. Zelda rode Juniper, while Wyatt was on his own horse, a big buckskin gelding named Dusty. They followed a narrow trail that wound up into the mountains, climbing steadily through juniper and piñon pine. "There is a place I want to show you," Wyatt said. "A meadow I found a few years back. It is one of the most beautiful spots I have ever seen." They rode for about an hour, the trail growing steeper and rockier. Zelda was grateful for all the riding practice she had gotten over the past weeks, feeling confident in the saddle even on the challenging terrain. Finally, they emerged from the trees into a high mountain meadow. Zelda gasped. The meadow was carpeted with wildflowers in every color imaginable, purple and yellow and red and white. A small stream ran through the center, its water crystal clear and icy cold from snowmelt. And beyond the meadow, the mountains rose in jagged peaks against the endless blue sky. "Wyatt, this is breathtaking," she said, dismounting and walking into the meadow. The wildflowers brushed against her legs, and the air was filled with their sweet scent and the buzz of bees. Wyatt dismounted as well, letting both horses drink from the stream before tying them loosely to some low bushes where they could graze. He walked over to where Zelda stood in the middle of the meadow, turning slowly to take in the 360-degree view of beauty. "I wanted you to see this," he said. "This is why I love Colorado. This is what keeps me here even when times are hard and the work is brutal. Moments like this, places like this." "I understand," Zelda said softly. "It is like standing in a cathedral, only better, more real somehow." They stood side by side in the meadow, not touching but so close that Zelda could feel the warmth radiating from Wyatt's body. Then, slowly, he turned to face her. "Zelda," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her heart race. "I know it has only been 2 months since you came to Colorado. I know that is not very long, but I need to tell you how I feel." "Tell me," Zelda said, her voice barely a whisper. "I am in love with you," Wyatt said simply. "I think I started falling for you that first day when I caught you in front of the general store. You looked so lost and overwhelmed, but there was determination in your eyes, a refusal to be defeated. And every day since then, I have fallen more in love with you. The way you work so hard to learn everything, The way you laugh when one of the chickens outsmarted you. The way you look at the mountains like you are seeing them for the first time, even though you see them every day. I love all of it. I love you." Tears pricked Zelda's eyes. "I love you too," she said. "I did not come to Colorado looking for love. I came looking for myself, but I found both, and I cannot imagine one without the other anymore." Wyatt reached up and gently cupped her face in his hands. "May I kiss you, please?" Zelda whispered. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but Zelda did not want to pull away. She wanted this more than she could remember wanting anything. When his lips finally met hers, it was soft and sweet and perfect. Zelda's eyes fluttered closed and she leaned into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest on Wyatt's chest, feeling his heart beating fast beneath her palms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. "I want to marry you, Zelda," he said. "I know that is fast, and I know you might need more time, but I want you to know my intentions. I want to spend my life with you." Zelda's tears spilled over, running down her sunburned cheeks. "Yes," she said. "My answer is yes." Wyatt pulled back slightly, his green eyes wide with surprise and joy. "Yes, you mean it." "I mean it," Zelda confirmed. "I love you, Wyatt Weston, and I want to marry you and build a life here in Colorado with you." Wyatt let out a whoop of joy that echoed off the surrounding mountains. Then he swept Zelda up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her back on her feet, he kissed her again, deeper this time, and Zelda felt like her heart might burst from happiness. They spent another hour in the meadow, sitting together by the stream, making plans and dreaming about their future. Wyatt told her about his ranch, about the house he had built with his own hands, about his plans to expand the herd and maybe start raising more horses. Zelda told him about the things she wanted to learn, about how she wanted to continue helping Martha even after they married, about how she never wanted to lose the independence and capability she had worked so hard to develop. "I would never ask you to," Wyatt assured her. "One of the things I love most about you is your strength and determination. I want a partner, Zelda, not a possession. I want someone who stands beside me and faces life with me, and I believe that is who you are." As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, they reluctantly prepared to head back down the mountain. Wyatt helped Zelda mount Juniper, his hands lingering at her waist. "We should tell Martha tonight," he said. "Ask her blessing, though I think we both know what she will say." "She will be impossible," Zelda predicted with a laugh. "She will claim she knew all along and planned the whole thing." "Did she?" Wyatt asked, amused. "Probably," Zelda admitted. They rode back down the mountain in the golden light of late afternoon, and Zelda felt like she was living in a dream. 2 months ago, she had been a proper Boston lady, constrained by society's expectations and unsure of her place in the world. Now she was a ranch woman who could milk a cow and collect eggs and ride a horse through the mountains. And she was engaged to marry the finest man she had ever known. When they arrived back at Martha's ranch, the older woman took one look at their faces and burst into delighted laughter. "I knew it," she exclaimed. "I told Thomas, God rest him, that if we could just get a nice girl out here for Wyatt, nature would take its course, and look what happened." "You did not tell Thomas any such thing," Wyatt said, but he was smiling. "He passed 2 years ago and Zelda only arrived 2 months ago." "Well, I would have told him if he were still alive," Martha said unrepentantly. "The point is, I am delighted for you both. When is the wedding?" "We have not discussed that yet," Zelda said. "Sooner rather than later," Wyatt said, looking at Zelda. "I do not see the point in waiting, unless you want a big fancy wedding with guests coming from Boston." Zelda shook her head firmly. "No, I want something simple, here in Colorado with just the people who matter." "What about September?" That gives us a few weeks to prepare." "September sounds perfect," Wyatt agreed. Over the next month, preparations for the wedding consumed much of Zelda's time, though there was still daily ranch work to be done as well. Word spread quickly through the small community, and Zelda was touched by how warmly the people of Fort Garland welcomed her. Women she had never met came by to offer advice or gifts, or simply to express their happiness for Wyatt, who was clearly beloved in the community. Mrs. Patterson from the general store helped Zelda sew a simple but beautiful wedding dress in cream-colored cotton. It was nothing like the elaborate silk gown she would have worn for a Boston wedding, but Zelda loved it more because she had helped make it with her own hands. Wyatt spent the time finishing some repairs on his ranch house, getting it ready for Zelda to move in after the wedding. Martha rode over with Zelda several times to see the house and help with preparations. It was a modest adobe structure, similar to Martha's but slightly larger, with a big kitchen, a comfortable main room with a stone fireplace, and 2 bedrooms. Wyatt had built it sturdy and practical, meant to withstand Colorado's harsh weather. "We can add on as we need to," Wyatt told Zelda as they walked through the house together. "If we have children, we will need more space eventually." The thought of children, of a family with Wyatt, made Zelda's heart swell. "It is perfect," she said. "I do not need anything fancy, I just need you." They decided to hold the wedding outdoors on Wyatt's ranch, with the Sangre de Cristo Mountains as their backdrop. It seemed fitting to make their vows in this wild, beautiful place that had brought them together. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cool, a perfect September day. Zelda woke in her room at Martha's ranch for the last time, feeling both excited and slightly nervous. Martha came in with a cup of coffee and sat on the edge of the bed. "Having second thoughts?" Martha asked gently. "Not even for a moment," Zelda said. "I am just nervous about the ceremony itself. What if I trip walking toward Wyatt? What if I forget my vows?" "You will be fine," Martha assured her. "And even if you do trip or forget your words, it will not matter. Wyatt will still be there waiting for you, loving you. That is the only thing that really matters." The ceremony was set for late afternoon to avoid the worst of the day's heat. Zelda dressed carefully in her new wedding dress, and Martha braided wildflowers into her hair. Looking at herself in the small mirror, Zelda barely recognized the woman staring back. She was tanned and strong, her face free of the powder and rouge that Boston society had deemed necessary. She looked healthy and happy and alive in a way she had never looked back east. When they arrived at Wyatt's ranch, Zelda's breath caught at the sight. Wyatt had set up chairs in rows facing the mountains, with an arch woven from branches and decorated with more wildflowers standing where they would exchange their vows. It was simple and natural and absolutely perfect. About 30 people had gathered, nearly the entire population of Fort Garland and the surrounding homesteads. They stood and turned as Zelda approached, Martha at her side serving as both her aunt and the person giving her away. But Zelda barely saw any of them. Her eyes were locked on Wyatt, standing beneath the arch in a clean white shirt and dark pants, his hat in his hands. The late afternoon sun lit his face, and the look in his eyes as he watched her approach was so full of love that Zelda felt tears threaten. The minister from Fort Garland, an older man named Reverend Paulson, conducted the ceremony. It was brief and straightforward, no flowery language or lengthy rituals, just the essential vows. When it came time for Wyatt to speak, he took Zelda's hands in his and looked into her eyes. "I, Wyatt Weston, take you, Zelda Owens, to be my wife. I promise to love you in the brutal heat of summer and the bitter cold of winter. I promise to stand beside you through good times and hard times, through success and failure. I promise to respect your strength and support you when you need support. I promise to build a life with you that honors both of us. I promise this until my last breath." Zelda's voice shook slightly as she repeated similar vows, promising to love and cherish Wyatt through all the challenges life might bring. When Reverend Paulson finally pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt pulled Zelda close and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of their gathered friends and neighbors. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. Martha and Mrs. Patterson had organized food and drink, and someone produced a fiddle and played dancing music as the sun sank toward the western mountains. Wyatt and Zelda danced together, swaying to the music, lost in each other. "Are you happy?" Wyatt asked, his lips close to her ear. "I have never been happier in my entire life," Zelda answered honestly. As darkness fell and the stars emerged in the vast Colorado sky, the guests began to depart, offering final congratulations before heading back to their own homes. Martha hugged Zelda tightly before she left. "Your mother would be proud of you," Martha whispered. "Even if she does not understand why you chose this life, I am proud of you." "Thank you for inviting me here," Zelda said, her voice thick with emotion, "for giving me this chance." "You took the chance all on your own," Martha said. "I just opened a door. You were brave enough to walk through it." Finally, Zelda and Wyatt were alone under the stars. Wyatt took her hand and led her into their house, closing the door on the rest of the world. Inside, candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the adobe walls. "Welcome home, Mrs. Weston," Wyatt said softly. "I love the sound of that," Zelda said, stepping into her husband's arms. They stood there in the candlelight, holding each other, and Zelda marveled at how completely her life had transformed. She had come to Colorado searching for independence and had found so much more. She had found strength she did not know she possessed. She had found work that satisfied her soul. She had found a land that challenged and rewarded her in equal measure. And she had found love, true and deep and real. That night, in the home Wyatt had built with his own hands, they became husband and wife in every sense. Wyatt was tender and patient, and Zelda felt cherished and desired and wholly herself. They loved each other through the night, and when Zelda finally fell asleep in Wyatt's arms, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. The first year of their marriage was both harder and more wonderful than Zelda had imagined. Running 2 ranches kept them constantly busy. They decided that Zelda would continue to help Martha several days a week while also working on their own ranch. It meant long days and constant labor, but Zelda thrived on it. She learned to help Wyatt with the cattle, riding out with him to check the herd and move them to different pastures. She learned to assist with branding and roundup, hard and exhausting work that left her covered in dust and smelling of cattle and smoke. She learned to help with foaling season, staying up through the night when a mare went into labor, experiencing the miracle of new life in the cold pre-dawn hours. Through it all, her love for Wyatt only deepened. She loved seeing him work, the competent way he handled everything from a skittish horse to a broken fence. She loved the quiet evenings when they sat on their porch and watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. She loved the way he looked at her, like she was the most precious thing in his world. And she loved the nights when they came together in their bed, their passion tempered by tenderness and growing familiarity with each other's bodies. Winter came to the valley, bringing snow and bitter cold. Wyatt taught Zelda how to survive the harsh Colorado winters, how to dress in layers and protect the animals from freezing. They spent long evenings by the fireplace, Wyatt reading aloud while Zelda mended clothes or worked on other tasks. Sometimes they would just talk, sharing stories from their pasts, dreams for their future, random thoughts and observations about life. One particularly brutal night in January, Zelda woke to the howl of wind outside. Snow was falling so thick and fast that she could not see more than a few feet when she looked out the window. "Blizzard," Wyatt said, appearing at her side. He looked worried. "A bad one. We need to make sure the animals are secure." They bundled up in every layer they owned and fought their way through the driving snow to the barn. The horses whinnied nervously, and Wyatt checked each one carefully, making sure they had food and water. The wind screamed around the barn, and snow found its way through every crack and crevice. "Will we be all right?" Zelda asked, having to shout to be heard over the wind. "We will be fine," Wyatt assured her, though she could see the concern in his eyes. "The house is solid, we have plenty of firewood and food, we just need to wait it out." The blizzard lasted 3 days. The snow piled so high against the house that they could barely open the door. They stayed inside except for necessary trips to the barn to care for the horses. Wyatt entertained Zelda with stories from his childhood in Texas, and Zelda taught him a card game she had learned in Boston. They made love by the fireplace, wrapped in blankets, finding warmth and comfort in each other. When the storm finally broke and they were able to dig their way out, the world had been transformed into a landscape of white, beautiful and deadly. Several cattle had not survived the blizzard, losses that hurt both financially and emotionally. But the horses were all fine, and their house had weathered the storm without damage. "This is the life out here," Wyatt said as they surveyed the damage. "Beautiful and brutal, just like you said your first day. We celebrate the good times because we know the hard times will come. We face it together," Zelda said, taking his hand. "That makes all the difference." Spring arrived eventually, as it always did, the snow melting to reveal the brown earth beneath. The valley began to green up, and wildflowers started to appear. Zelda discovered she was pregnant in late April, and the joy she and Wyatt felt was almost overwhelming. "A baby," Wyatt kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. He placed his hand on Zelda's still flat stomach with wonder. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Zelda asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "I did not know I could be this happy," Wyatt said. He kissed her gently. "You have given me everything, Zelda. A home, a partner, and now a family." Martha was equally delighted when they told her the news. "I am going to be a great aunt," she exclaimed. "Oh, this is wonderful, though you will need to take it easier now, Zelda. No more heavy lifting or dangerous work." Zelda chafed at the restrictions at first, used to working hard every day. But Wyatt was gently insistent, taking over tasks that had been hers and refusing to let her do anything too strenuous. It was frustrating but also touching, seeing how much he cared about keeping her and the baby safe. As summer arrived and Zelda's belly began to swell, she found herself thinking about that first day in Fort Garland. How the sun had beaten down on her, how overwhelming and foreign everything had seemed. How Wyatt had caught her when she fell, shading her with his body, offering his strength when she had none of her own. One afternoon in late July, almost exactly a year since her arrival in Colorado, Zelda asked Wyatt to take her back to Fort Garland. She wanted to visit Mrs. Patterson and see the town again with her new eyes. They rode in the wagon rather than on horseback, with Zelda sitting beside Wyatt on the seat. It was another scorching day, the sun beating down mercilessly, but Zelda wore one of the hats Wyatt had given her and did not mind the heat the way she once had. She had adapted, become a creature of this land. Fort Garland looked much the same as it had a year ago, but Zelda saw it differently now. Then it had seemed small and dusty and forbidding. Now it looked like a community, a gathering place for hardy people trying to make lives in a challenging land. It looked like home. Mrs. Patterson embraced Zelda warmly when they entered the general store. "Look at you," she exclaimed. "A married woman expecting her first child. I am so happy for you both." They visited for a while, catching up on the town gossip before Zelda asked, "Mrs. Patterson, do you remember the day I arrived, when I fainted right there in the street?" "Of course I remember," Mrs. Patterson said. "You were white as a sheet and about to collapse from the heat." "Wyatt caught me," Zelda said, looking at her husband. "He shaded me with his body and his hat, kept the sun off me until we could get inside. I have been thinking about that moment lately. In a way, he has been shading me ever since. Not because I am weak, but because that is what partners do. They provide shelter and support for each other." Wyatt took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You shade me too," he said softly. "You brought light and joy into my life. You made my house a home. You gave me purpose beyond just surviving." "Well, you are going to make me cry," Mrs. Patterson said, fanning her eyes. "You two are good for each other. That is as clear as day." On the ride home, Zelda leaned against Wyatt's shoulder, feeling peaceful and content. Her baby moved inside her, small flutters that still amazed her every time she felt them. The mountains rose around them, eternal and magnificent. And beside her sat the man she loved, steady and strong and kind. "I never thanked you properly," Zelda said. "For what?" Wyatt asked. "For catching me that first day, for shading me from the sun, for giving me a chance to find myself while also finding love." Wyatt pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to look at her. "You do not need to thank me for any of that. You caught me just as surely as I caught you. You shaded my heart, Zelda. You made me whole." He kissed her there in the middle of the dusty road, and Zelda kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into that kiss. Around them, the Colorado sun beat down, but they did not mind. They had each other, and that was all the shelter they needed. Zelda gave birth to their first child in December, during another snowstorm. The labor was long and difficult, but Martha was there to help, along with a midwife from Fort Garland who had delivered half the babies in the valley. Wyatt paced outside in the snow, too anxious to sit still, until Martha finally came out to tell him he had a healthy baby boy. Wyatt burst into the bedroom to find Zelda propped up against the pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "A son," she said, smiling up at him. "We have a son, Wyatt." Wyatt approached slowly, as if afraid he might break something. When Zelda pulled back the blanket to reveal their baby's face, wrinkled and red and absolutely perfect, Wyatt felt tears stream down his face. He had not cried in years, but seeing his wife and his son overwhelmed him completely. "He is perfect," Wyatt whispered, gently touching one tiny fist. "You are perfect. I love you so much, Zelda." They named him Thomas William Weston, honoring both Martha's late husband and Wyatt's own name. Little Tommy was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them both awake through the winter nights, but filled their home with new life and joy. Watching Wyatt with their son, Zelda fell in love with him all over again. He was so gentle with the baby, so patient and tender. He would sit by the fire for hours with Tommy in his arms, just watching him sleep, and the expression on his face was one of pure love and wonder. "I never knew," he told Zelda one night. "I never knew I could love someone this much. I thought what I felt for you was the deepest love possible, but now there is this too, and it just keeps growing." "I know exactly what you mean," Zelda said. She was nursing Tommy, and Wyatt sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. They were a family now, a unit, facing whatever life might bring together. The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythm of ranch life. Tommy grew from a baby into a sturdy toddler with his father's green eyes and his mother's determination. 2 years after Tommy's birth, Zelda gave birth to a daughter they named Caroline Martha Weston, after Zelda's mother and Martha. Caroline had Zelda's brown hair and Wyatt's smile, and she was spirited from the day she was born. Their ranch prospered through hard work and good luck. Wyatt expanded the herd gradually, and his horses gained a reputation for quality throughout the territory. Zelda became known in her own right as someone knowledgeable about ranch life, and younger women new to the area would often seek her advice. She never forgot how overwhelming Colorado had seemed at first, and was always patient and encouraging with newcomers. Martha stayed healthy and active well into her 60s, though she eventually sold most of her cattle and kept only a few horses and chickens. She spent more and more time at Wyatt and Zelda's ranch, doting on her great-niece and great-nephew, helping with the children while Zelda worked. On Tommy's 5th birthday, Wyatt took his son out on his first real horseback ride, just the two of them. Zelda stood on the porch with Caroline on her hip and Martha beside her, watching as her husband and son rode off together. Tommy sat in front of Wyatt in the saddle, chattering excitedly, and Wyatt's patience and gentleness with the boy made Zelda's heart swell. "You chose well," Martha said, following Zelda's gaze. "I did," Zelda agreed. "Or maybe we chose each other. Either way, I am grateful every single day." "Do you ever miss Boston?" Martha asked. It was a question she had asked before over the years. "Not even a little bit," Zelda said honestly. "I miss my parents sometimes, wish they could have understood my choice. But this is my home, Martha. This is where I belong." Her parents had never fully accepted Zelda's decision to marry a cowboy and stay in Colorado. They had come out for the wedding, her mother appalled by the rough conditions, and her father bewildered by Zelda's choice to give up Boston society for ranch life. The visits had been tense and uncomfortable, and eventually they had stopped coming altogether. It hurt Zelda that they could not see how happy she was, but she had made peace with it. She wrote them letters regularly, sent photographs of the children, and hoped that someday they might understand. When Tommy and Wyatt returned from their ride, Tommy was bursting with excitement, talking a mile a minute about everything he had seen. Wyatt caught Zelda's eye over their son's head and smiled, and in that smile was all the love and contentment and joy of their life together. That evening, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Wyatt and Zelda sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The stars blazed overhead in the clear mountain air, more stars than could ever be seen in a city, and the mountains were dark silhouettes against the sky. "Do you remember our first kiss?" Zelda asked, leaning against Wyatt's shoulder. "In the meadow with the wildflowers." "I remember everything about that day," Wyatt said. He put his arm around her, pulling her close. "I was so nervous I was shaking. I was terrified you would say it was too soon, that I was rushing you. I was terrified you would not kiss me," Zelda admitted with a laugh. "I kept thinking about it, wondering if you felt the same way I did." "I fell for you so fast," Wyatt said. "That first day when you stepped off the stagecoach, looking so out of place and so determined at the same time, I felt something shift in my chest. And every day after that I fell harder. By the time we rode up to that meadow, I was already completely in love with you. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if I had stayed in Boston," Zelda said. "I would have married some appropriate man chosen by my parents. I would have spent my days making social calls and hosting dinner parties and dying slowly of boredom. I would never have known what it felt like to work with my own hands, to build something real. I would never have known what real love felt like. I would have stayed alone," Wyatt said quietly. "I would have worked my ranch and lived a half-life, never knowing what I was missing. You saved me, Zelda. You brought color and joy and meaning to my existence." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted somewhere in the distance. The horses moved restlessly in the corral. Inside the house, one of the children stirred and then settled back to sleep. "I want to grow old with you," Zelda said. "I want to sit on this porch when we are ancient and gray, surrounded by grandchildren, and look back on a life well lived." "That is exactly what we will do," Wyatt promised. He tilted her face up and kissed her, slow and sweet, a kiss that held all the tenderness of their years together. More years passed, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Colorado was not an easy place to live, and ranching was not an easy way to make a living. There were droughts that left the grasslands brown and brittle, threatening the cattle. There were harsh winters that took a toll on both animals and people. There were injuries and illnesses, financial setbacks and disappointments. But there were also moments of transcendent beauty and joy. The birth of their third child, another son they named James. Tommy's pride when he successfully roped his first calf. Caroline's laughter as she raced her horse across the valley. The first time James called Wyatt Papa in his small, serious voice. Quiet evenings as a family. Everyone gathered around the fireplace while Wyatt read aloud or Zelda played the old piano Wyatt had surprised her with on their 5th anniversary. Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep when she was 68, and they buried her next to Uncle Thomas on a hillside overlooking the valley she had loved. Zelda grieved deeply for the aunt who had given her a chance at a different life, but she took comfort in knowing that Martha had died happy, surrounded by the family she loved. Tommy grew into a young man much like his father, quiet and capable and deeply connected to the land. By the time he was 16, he was running much of the ranch operations alongside Wyatt. Caroline was spirited and independent, determined to learn everything her brother learned, refusing to be limited by her gender. She could rope and ride and shoot as well as any boy, and Wyatt and Zelda encouraged her fierce independence, remembering Zelda's own journey to self-discovery. James was the dreamer of the family, more interested in books and drawing than in ranch work, but Zelda fiercely defended his right to pursue his own interests. "Not everyone has to be a rancher," she would tell Wyatt. "James will find his own path." When Zelda turned 40, Wyatt surprised her with a trip back to the meadow where he had first kissed her and proposed. They left the children in Tommy's capable care and rode up into the mountains on a perfect September day, retracing the path they had taken so many years before. The meadow was just as beautiful as Zelda remembered, carpeted with the same late-season wildflowers, the mountains rising all around them. They dismounted and walked to the center of the meadow, and Zelda felt transported back in time to that moment when she had been a young woman falling in love for the first time. 18 years, Wyatt said, taking both her hands in his. 18 years since I brought you here and told you I loved you. 18 years of marriage, of building a life together, and I love you more now than I did then. I did not think that was possible, but every year I fall more in love with you." Zelda felt tears streaming down her face. "You are everything to me, Wyatt. My partner, my best friend, the love of my life. These 18 years have been the greatest gift I could have asked for." Wyatt pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a turquoise pendant. "I had this made for you. The turquoise is from Colorado, from this land we both love. I wanted you to have something beautiful that represents our life here." Zelda let him fasten the necklace around her neck, the turquoise cool against her skin. Then she kissed him, and it was like being young again, full of passion and promise and love. They made love there in the meadow, in the afternoon sunshine, with the mountains as their only witnesses. It was tender and passionate, familiar, and yet still exciting after all these years. Afterward they lay together in the wildflowers, Zelda's head on Wyatt's chest, his arms around her. "Thank you," Zelda whispered. "For what?" Wyatt asked, his hand stroking her hair. "For this, for us, for giving me a life beyond anything I imagined possible. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes to Colorado, Wyatt replied. For being brave enough to say yes to me. As the years continued to pass, Zelda and Wyatt watched their children grow into adults. Tommy married a sweet girl from Fort Garland named Sarah, and they built a house on the far edge of the Weston Ranch. Soon Tommy and Sarah had children of their own, making Zelda and Wyatt grandparents. The first grandchild was a girl they named Zelda, and holding her tiny namesake, Zelda felt the circle of life complete itself in the most beautiful way. Caroline, true to her independent spirit, became a teacher and moved to Denver, where she taught at a school for girls. She wrote long letters home describing the growing city and her work, and though Zelda missed her daughter, she was proud of Caroline for following her own path. James discovered a talent for drawing and painting, and his artwork, mostly landscapes of Colorado, began to sell in Denver and even further east. He stayed on the ranch, converting one of the outbuildings into a studio, and visitors would come from all over to commission paintings of the magnificent Colorado landscape. Wyatt's hair turned gray, and then white, and lines deepened around his eyes from years of squinting into the bright Colorado sun. But he was still strong and capable, still working the ranch every day alongside Tommy. Zelda's own hair grayed too, and her hands grew more gnarled with arthritis, but she remained active and engaged, helping with the grandchildren and the endless work of ranch life. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Tommy and Sarah were there with their 3 children. Caroline came home from Denver with a young man she was courting, a lawyer who looked slightly overwhelmed by the Weston clan, but was clearly devoted to Caroline. James had painted a special portrait for the occasion, a stunning landscape of the meadow where Wyatt and Zelda had been engaged, and everyone exclaimed over its beauty. As Zelda looked around at her family, at the life she and Wyatt had built together, she felt overwhelming gratitude. She thought back to that scared young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Fort Garland 25 years ago, unprepared and overwhelmed by the harsh Colorado sun. That woman had been caught by a cowboy, shaded by his hat and his body, protected until she could find her own strength. But the truth, Zelda had learned, was more complex than that simple narrative. Yes, Wyatt had caught her when she fell. Yes, he had shaded her and protected her. But she had also caught him, had shaded his heart and given his life new meaning. They had saved each other, built each other up, become more together than either could have been alone. That evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, Zelda and Wyatt sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and unchanging, and the mountains stood guard over the valley. If you could go back, Wyatt asked, and do it all over again, would you change anything? Zelda considered the question seriously. There had been hard times, moments of struggle and pain and loss. But there had also been so much joy, so much love, so much life lived fully and richly. Not a single thing, she finally answered. Every moment, good and bad, brought us to where we are now, and where we are is exactly where I want to be. Wyatt took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after so many years. His hands were weathered and scarred from decades of hard work, and so were hers. They were the hands of people who had built a life together through determination and love. I love you, Zelda Weston, Wyatt said. I have loved you for 25 years, and I will love you for however many years we have left. And I love you, Wyatt Weston, Zelda replied. My cowboy, my partner, my love. Thank you for catching me all those years ago. Thank you for shading me from the sun. Thank you for letting me, Wyatt said softly. Thank you for shading me right back. They sat together on the porch as the night deepened, two people who had found each other against all odds in the wild, beautiful, harsh land of Colorado. The desert sun had burned Zelda's skin that first day, but the cowboy had shaded her with his hat and his body. And in return, she had shaded his heart with her love, her strength, her courage. Together, they had built a life of meaning and purpose. They had faced the challenges of the West and thrived. They had raised a family and built a legacy. They had loved each other through heat and cold, through drought and storm, through joy and sorrow. And as they sat there under the stars, hands clasped and hearts joined, they knew that their love story, begun in the scorching sun of a July day in Fort Garland, would continue until their last breaths. It was a love story worthy of the land that had brought them together, as enduring as the mountains and as deep as the Colorado sky. The years continued to unfold, each one a gift. There were more grandchildren, eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch passed primarily to Tommy, though all the children benefited from its success. Wyatt and Zelda gradually stepped back from the daily operations, though Wyatt could never quite stop checking on the cattle, and Zelda continued to maintain her vegetable garden with fierce determination. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their entire extended family gathered once again. There were now 12 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren, and the ranch house that Wyatt had built with his own hands could barely contain them all. They spilled out onto the porch and into the yard, a noisy, joyful celebration of family and love. Caroline's son, a doctor in Denver, made a toast. "To my grandparents," he said, raising his glass, "who showed all of us what real love looks like, who built a life together through hard work and devotion, who proved that true partnership means supporting each other's strengths and shading each other's weaknesses. May we all be lucky enough to find what they found." Everyone cheered and drank, and Zelda felt Wyatt's arm around her shoulders, solid and steady after 4 decades together. She leaned into him, and he pressed a kiss to her temple, and in that moment, Zelda felt completely content. As evening fell and the grandchildren played in the yard, Zelda and Wyatt walked together out to the edge of their property, to the spot where they could see both the Sangre de Cristo Mountains to the east and the San Juans to the west. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, and the mountains glowed in the fading light. 40 years, Zelda said wonderingly. "How did 40 years pass so quickly?" "I have no idea," Wyatt admitted. "Seems like just yesterday I was catching a beautiful woman as she fainted in the Fort Garland sun." "I was such a mess that day," Zelda said with a laugh. "So unprepared, so out of my element." "You were brave," Wyatt corrected. "You came to a completely foreign place alone, ready to start a new life. That takes real courage." "I had help," Zelda said, squeezing his hand. "I had you." "We had each other," Wyatt said. "That is what made all the difference." They stood there watching the sunset, and Zelda thought about all the sunsets they had watched together over the years. Thousands of them, each one unique, each one beautiful. The Colorado sun that had burned her skin that first day had become a constant companion, marking the passage of their days, the rhythm of their life. "You remember what I said that day in the meadow?" Zelda asked. "About wanting to grow old with you on this porch, surrounded by grandchildren." "I remember," Wyatt said. "We did it," Zelda said softly. "We built exactly the life we wanted. We faced everything together and came out strong." "Best decision I ever made," Wyatt said, "was loving you. Everything good in my life came from that one choice." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they walked back to the house together, moving more slowly than they had in their youth, but still strong, still together. The sounds of family drifted out to meet them, laughter and conversation and the shrieks of playing children. Inside, Tommy was telling his own children about the day their grandmother had arrived in Colorado, dramatically acting out how she had fainted in the street and how their grandfather had caught her. The children listened with wide eyes, and Zelda felt her heart swell with love for this family they had created. Late that night, long after everyone else had gone to sleep, Zelda lay in bed next to Wyatt, listening to his breathing. After 40 years, she could tell by the rhythm whether he was truly asleep or just resting. Tonight he was awake. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "Everything," Wyatt replied. "Our whole life together, how blessed I have been." "Me too," Zelda said. She rolled onto her side and Wyatt adjusted to hold her, their bodies fitting together perfectly after so many years. "I hope we have many more years together." "However many years we get, they will be enough," Wyatt said. "Because I have loved you fully every single day, I have held nothing back. So even if tomorrow were our last day, I would have no regrets." "Do not talk about last days," Zelda said, though she understood what he meant. They were both in their 60s now, and while they remained relatively healthy, they were aware that they had more years behind them than ahead. "I am not being morbid," Wyatt assured her. "I am just grateful. Grateful for every moment we have had, for this life we built, for the love we share." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, and Zelda dreamed of wildflowers and mountains and green eyes full of love. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Spring brought new life to the valley, wildflowers carpeting the meadows and foals being born in the corrals. Summer brought the intense heat and the hard work of haying and managing the cattle. Fall brought cooler temperatures and the brilliant gold of aspen leaves turning. Winter brought snow and the quiet satisfaction of a year well lived. Wyatt and Zelda continued to thrive, though age inevitably took its toll. Wyatt's joints ached more on cold mornings, and Zelda's eyesight began to fail slightly, requiring her to use reading glasses for the first time in her life. But they adapted, helping each other with tasks that had become more difficult, never complaining, always grateful for each new day together. One spring morning, when Wyatt was 68 and Zelda was 67, they woke to find the valley transformed by an unexpected late-season snowstorm. The world outside their window was white and pristine, the mountains hidden by falling snow. "Beautiful," Zelda murmured, watching the snow fall. "Want to go for a walk?" Wyatt asked. "Like we used to do when we were younger in a snowstorm," Zelda asked, amused. "We will freeze." "We will bundle up," Wyatt said. "Come on, Zelda." "When was the last time we just walked together in the snow with nowhere to be and nothing urgent to do?" He was right, Zelda realized. With the ranch operations now primarily Tommy's responsibility, they had more leisure time than they had enjoyed in decades. Why not take advantage of it? They dressed warmly in layers of wool and leather, pulled on boots and hats and gloves, and stepped out into the falling snow. It was not quite as frigid as midwinter storms, with the temperature hovering right around freezing. The snow was wet and heavy, clinging to every surface. They walked hand in hand through the white landscape, following paths they had walked thousands of times before. Everything looked different under the blanket of snow, magical and new. They did not talk much, content to simply be together, listening to the silence that only a snowstorm can bring. Eventually, they made their way back to the house, stomping snow off their boots on the porch. Inside, Wyatt built up the fire while Zelda made hot coffee. They sat together by the fireplace, warming their hands on the coffee mugs, and looked at each other. "Thank you," Zelda said. "For a walk in the snow?" Wyatt asked, smiling. "For reminding me to enjoy the moment," Zelda said. "For all the little ways you make my life better every single day." "Right back at you," Wyatt said. He reached over and took her hand. "I love you, Zelda. After all these years, you still make my heart race." "And you still make me feel safe and cherished and wholly myself," Zelda replied. "What a gift that has been." They sat by the fire for hours that day, talking about everything and nothing, reminiscing about their life together, making plans for the spring and summer ahead. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside they were warm and safe and together. As Zelda approached her 70th birthday, she found herself reflecting more and more on her life's journey. From that scared young woman stepping off the stagecoach in Fort Garland to the weathered, confident ranch woman she had become, the transformation had been complete. She barely recognized the person she had been back in Boston, constrained by propriety and expectations. That person seemed like a character from a book, not her actual past self. Her 70th birthday celebration was held at the ranch in July, almost exactly 50 years since she had arrived in Colorado. The entire family gathered once again, now even larger than before. There were great-great-grandchildren now, babies who would never know a world without the foundation that Zelda and Wyatt had built. During the celebration, one of Zelda's great-granddaughters, a serious 10-year-old named Emma, approached her. "Grandmother Zelda," Emma said, "will you tell me the story of how you and Grandfather Wyatt met? Daddy tells it sometimes, but I want to hear it from you." Zelda smiled and patted the bench beside her. "Sit down, child, and I will tell you the whole story." She told Emma about arriving in Fort Garland, overwhelmed by the heat and the foreign landscape. About fainting in the street and being caught by a cowboy who shaded her with his hat and his body. About learning to work the ranch and falling in love with both the land and the man. About building a life together through hard work and devotion and love. Emma listened with rapt attention, her eyes wide. "That is the most romantic story I have ever heard," she declared when Zelda had finished. "Grandfather Wyatt is like a hero from a book." "He is my hero," Zelda agreed. She looked across the yard to where Wyatt sat with some of the other grandchildren, his white hair glinting in the sun, his face creased with smile lines. As if feeling her gaze, he looked up, and their eyes met across the distance. He smiled, and she smiled back, and in that exchange was all the love and history and connection of their 50 years together. That evening, after everyone else had left or gone to bed, Zelda and Wyatt took their customary seats on the porch. The July night was warm but not oppressive, with a slight breeze carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. 50 years, Wyatt said, echoing Zelda's thoughts from earlier. "Half a century since you arrived in Colorado." "Best 50 years of my life," Zelda said. "Though I cannot quite believe I am 70 years old. Inside, I still feel like that young woman who stepped off the stagecoach." "You are still that young woman," Wyatt said. "You have the same fire, the same determination, the same beautiful spirit. Your outsides may have aged, but your insides are exactly the same." "You always know the right thing to say," Zelda said fondly. "I've had a lot of practice," Wyatt pointed out. He stood and held out his hand. "Dance with me." "There is no music," Zelda said, but she took his hand anyway. "We do not need music," Wyatt said. He pulled her close, and they swayed together on the porch under the stars, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. It was the rhythm of their life together, the beat of their joined hearts, the song of their love. As they danced, Zelda rested her head on Wyatt's chest and closed her eyes. She could hear his heartbeat, still strong after all these years. She thought about all the times he had held her like this, in celebration and in sorrow, in passion and in comfort. His arms had always been her safe haven, her shelter from the storm. But she had been his shelter too. She had shaded his loneliness with companionship. She had shaded his empty house with warmth and family. She had shaded his purposeful but solitary existence with love and partnership. They had shaded each other, protected each other, built a life together that had weathered every storm. "I love you, Wyatt Weston," Zelda whispered against his chest. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you, Zelda Weston," Wyatt replied, his arms tightening around her. "You are my heart, my home, my everything." They danced on into the night, two people who had found each other in the harsh, beautiful land of Colorado and had built something extraordinary. The desert sun that had burned Zelda's skin on that first day had been tempered by the cowboy's shade. And together, sheltering each other, they had created a love that would echo through generations, a testament to the power of two people choosing each other every single day. Around them, the Colorado night wrapped them in its embrace. The mountains stood watch as they had for millions of years. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. And on the porch of a ranch house built with love and care, a cowboy and his wife held each other close and celebrated 50 years of a life well lived, a love well tended, a partnership that had grown stronger with every passing season. This was their legacy, not just the land they had worked or the family they had raised, but the example they had set of what true love could be. When the sun burns too hot and the world seems too harsh, they had shown there is shelter in each other. There is shade in love, in partnership, in choosing someone and being chosen in return. And as Zelda and Wyatt finally went inside for the night, walking hand in hand through the house that had sheltered them for so many years, they knew that whatever time they had left, they would face it together. Because that was what they had always done, from that first moment when he caught her in the burning Colorado sun until this moment, 50 years later, still catching each other, still providing shade and shelter and unwavering love. The story of how the desert sun burned her skin and the cowboy shaded her with his hat, and his body had become the story of their life, a beautiful metaphor for a beautiful love. And it was a story that would be told and retold through the generations, inspiring others to be brave enough to seek love, strong enough to build it, and devoted enough to protect and nurture it through all the seasons of life.